Peter Elliott is one of Australia's most respected architects. Over 50 years in practice, he is known for thoughtful and contextually grounded approach to civic and community housing. His work on Osborne House through the 1980s and 1990s represents a significant chapter in the building story. Thank you, Peter, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. I'm really pleased that you've been digging into the past, and I'm hope that I can get my memory to recall some of the incredible things that happened over that time.
Excellent. Could you take us back to the 1980s and share how the Osborne House project first came about? What kind of user groups or communities were you designing for?
It was a pretty interesting time. In fact, we might just jump one decade behind 1970s. As a young recent graduate from Melbourne Uni, as a young architect, got heavily involved in a number of community groups within the city of Fitzroy. And there was a period when there was a sort of threat from the freeways cutting through the inner city. There were no real heritage controls over things. And I think people were becoming more concerned about the displacement of some of the poorer people, like in particular the loss of boarding houses. St Vincent's Hospital owned pretty much the whole block that Osborne House is in, and Glass Terrace, among a number of other buildings. And they were in the process of seeking demolition permits for those buildings. And so a lot of people got very angry about that and did their best to lobby St Vincent's to try and convince them not to keep demolishing heritage buildings. They were pretty nonplussed about it. And very fortunately, in the early, I think 1982, the Labor government came in and with it brought a whole series of reforms. And around that time, don't remember the exact date, late 70s, early 80s, the Historic Buildings Council was formed. And so there were formal processes to register buildings of heritage significance. So Glass Terrace was one of those, still there today, an incredibly beautiful building from 1850. And Osborne House fell into a similar category. From memory, St Vincent's did use it as a boarding house, but it let it run down, and the Ministry of Housing rented it from St Vincent's.
Right, okay.
In the early days, and they wouldn't extend the lease. So Ministry of Housing very reluctant to spend money on the building if you can only get a 1-year lease or a 2-year lease. And then eventually St Vincent sold it to the Ministry of Housing. They didn't know what to do with it in a way because they didn't really want to run rooming houses. They'd had what's called a diversification program. So there was spot purchase, infill housing. So they'd stopped the high rise, obviously. And I think at one point in the mid-80s, they had maybe 45 rooming houses they'd bought all through the inner city to try and save the stock. So that's the social context. And then the fire brigade obviously were all over this building, like it had got very run down.
I've seen that in the historical documents.
So the first work we did, I think, didn't change much. It really just tried to make the building safe. And the client groups, because there was no real kind of people running the thing, and the tenants were just, some of them have been there 10, 15 years, maybe longer. And they'd all formed in these little, I just call them little community, little neighbourhoods. Basically the building was broken into all these little defendable neighbourhoods, very reluctant to talk to anybody. And so it was a kind of secret world that you just felt like you were stepping into someone's very private world. And so, and as a young architect, we really didn't have a proper brief. There was no brief. It was just, you had to work it out as you went. And I think as a young architect, very socially minded, I think it's one of the things that we learned a lot from, for just listening to people, just seeing how the building worked, and then trying to adapt the changes that were needed.
Yeah, very interesting.
So is that a good description, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. yeah, and definitely touches on a few of the sort of historical records we've been able to dig up from Heritage Victoria.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it fills in a few gaps too, actually, which is good. I was wondering if you could now take us back to the 1990s when you returned to the site.
Sure. As I say, the early work really just made the building safe. There was fire brigade work and probably roof work and, just generally making the building occupiable. And then by then there'd been I think the Fitzroy Collingwood Housing Association were the people who were managing the building, and they'd accumulated more knowledge about how to run rooming houses. And there's a very strong community involvement and relationship with the tenants. I recall meeting with a lot of the tenants at the time. And one of the things that was then decided was to fix the circulation system, because as you know, the original house,
yes,
had the 2 wings added on the side, the 3-storey wings.
Yes.
And for the 1888, was it?
Yes, that's right.
World Fair, which must have been pretty amazing. I mean, directly opposite,
Well,
great location, all
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And of course, over years, it's sort of gone into decline. But even so, there were, I think, about 100 rooms. Maybe there's a bit more than 100. And a number of rooms I remember being just blocked off bits of corridor. And one room in particular I remember, which is literally like 1.5 metres wide and the length of a bed. And it had crocodiling paint on both walls that had been there for years. And this man was living in there, and like literally he hadn't touched the wall. So he was living in a space about 1 metre wide by the legs. It was a pretty confronting reality, I suppose, of that kind of, and mixed people, very, like often people back from the Vietnam War, former police officers, people just struggling with life, really, and quite interesting, very happy to talk about their problems. And then, so fixing the circulation system meant combining the buildings back together again. And I think there's some drawings you would have found there that showed about improving daylight and opening the building up more so that it just felt more inviting, more welcoming, and easier to navigate your way around. And back then, the idea of the neighbourhoods was still the common thing, where shared bathrooms and shared kitchenettes, and people just had individual rooms. And I know progressively over time, of course, that was less acceptable, and so the ensuite model or the hotel room model was kind of where it was heading. And then, interestingly, opening it up had a counterintuitive problem, which was that the building didn't really work well from a social point of view. And so the building got closed back again into the wings. And so there's a sort of progression of opening it up, closing it up, creating the neighbourhoods, and then I guess progressively removing the shared facilities into more self-contained facilities, which sort of made it a much more acceptable kind of arrangement.
Yeah. Interestingly, where most of the rooms are in our proposal are self-contained, so a kitchenette and a bathroom.
Yeah.
But there are shared facilities coming back into the site.
Okay. So. Well, I liken it to a lot of the student college housing work that we've done, where there's a mixture of individual rooms with shared bathrooms, and maybe they're never more than 4 or 5 or 6 rooms that share a common bathroom. It's just part of university life. And there's other little, what we call kind of like a share house model, where there might be 3 or 4 bedrooms and a common living room and kitchen and bathroom. And then there's other self-contained units where you get a kitchenette and a bathroom, and a bedroom. Study. So I guess that kind of mixed model is commonplace in university accommodation, and people kind of choose according to how much they can pay and what kind of environment they want to live in, as to whether they want to share space. It's kind of sociably a bit more interesting in a share house than living alone, but I guess that's what people are going to decide.
Looking back now, how did you see the building's life change since your involvement? In terms of people using the building and the way you approached it, the design?
Look, I had really fond memories of those years and we did a lot of public housing work at that period. And I think the rooming house ones were the ones that were most impactful, I guess, just because you did get to meet the people. A lot of the other social housing work, you never knew who the clients were. Like you would just, and the changes that would happen, you would never really get to talk to the people who were occupying, but I know with Osborne House in particular, people knew your name, and I knew people's names as you went in. You'd say hello.
Wow.
There's always a little drinking group, particularly in that front, the amazing front recessed courtyard with the wrapping balcony. And there's photos there I think you would have come across with. There's one guy in particular, I remember he had a little garden going on that front veranda with tomatoes and stuff.
Yep.
It was full of characters, and it's kind of like, I guess it's a disappearing world. Society's been not very good about homelessness and people who are struggling. I hate it way the cops just move people on.
Yep.
So I think it was a more caring time, and so when I go past quite a lot, because I live in the neighbourhood, I do have the memories, but equally, times have moved on. It's the reality of life.
Yeah, of course. So you've had the experience of seeing Osborne House evolve over multiple decades. Now with Air's involvement, how do you see the next stage of Osborne House building on what came before?
Oh, look, I'm wrapped, guys. As I say, I used to go past quite distressed in the recent years, seeing the joint graffitied and fenced off and looking sad with a big for sale sign on it. I spoke to a number of my friends from that period, Sue Dance and Peter Lovell, those people, about why it was being sold and what was to happen to it. I guess our fears were that it wouldn't remain as a rooming house. But I was really pleased when you contacted me to let me know about what was happening. So you guys will do the job you need to do. I was just really pleased to hear that the building would have its continuity. That's very pleasing.
Yeah, it's 175 years of unbroken boarding house.
Yeah. Well, it's a surprise, to be frank. I'm genuinely surprised, but very pleased that you and your clients are going to look after the building again. It's really, really solid building. It obviously gets pretty run down pretty easily. Kitchens, bathrooms, they wear out in cyclical periods. So it'd be great to see it back alive again.
Yeah, those old bluestone foundations haven't really moved a lot. Well, thank you so much, Peter. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Cool.